Hello everyone, this is Dominic, and today, as an additional add-on to this series on beginning to learn 3D modeling in Maya, we're going to be making a microphone, and the process that I'm going to show here is called proxy blocking in. And so we had a couple of examples of this before, but for this particular demo, I thought it would be nice to show you guys just how far we can get with using very simple blocks. In this case, these are just cubes that I have made taller or shrunken or flattened out to kind of closely resemble, in our case, just a desktop like a podcast microphone. And so this gives us a lot to work with from just the get-go, and it's very important to always start your 3D models by blocking your objects in with simple proxy cubes, and we do that a lot. And so for here, even with just this little amount of work, a couple of minutes and just a handful of cubes, we've got, 7 of them, we've labeled them up here. I can already start to make sure my proportions are correct, make sure everything is, just the right measurement, just the right length and width and height before I start diving into this particular model. So I'm going off of my reference. I'm not going to show you guys the reference on the camera, but that's okay because this guy is very simple. So this bottom cube right here, we're just going to work our way from the bottom up just to kind of go from simple to more complex. This is a cylindrical, like a very thin cylinder. So if I cycle this through the smooth preview mode, I can already see we're about halfway there. And so I can hit 3 on the keyboard and bounce between 1 and 3 to kind of see what it looks like in rough mode or smooth preview mode. So this is telling me that I just need to, I can do this, delete the face, Control Delete, and I can bevel this top part up here, just like that with the bevel tool up here. We can turn chamfer off, we can reduce this to a very small number, and now we've got a pretty decent cylinder, flat cylinder looking base stand. Now it's not quite circular. If you kind of look at it from down here, you can see it's still a little bit jaggedy and it's still, kind of a squarish shape. And so we're going to fix that by using the circularize tool. But it's important when we're trying to make something that, has to respectively be circular or cylindrical, we do need to complete this step. We can't get away with it just using what is ultimately a cube or a rectangular prism. We've got to use something that has a little bit more geometry, a little bit more edge loops. And so what I can do here is I can go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and I can add one equally on either axis right here. And now I can select all of the edge loops that need to be a circle. So that's all of them. I've got 4 edge loops right here, and I can just use this tool up here called Circularize, and now you can see it's almost an octagonal shape, but if I put it in smooth preview mode, it looks much better. And so I'm just going to add a little bit more fidelity by selecting these 4 faces right here, and then just shrinking that in, just so that way I can kind of space and even out my geometry. So it looks a little bit more pretty, and that's going to help me whenever I have to UV unwrap and texture it, of course. But as you can see very quickly, this guy is good to go. Now I've got this cube right here, and this guy is going to be very similar in terms of process right here. So first things first, I can hide the base because I'm kind of done with that for now. I'm not going to come back to it till later, maybe if I have to, but I don't want to worry about it right now, so I can use Control H to hide it. But let's go ahead and delete this bottom face right here because we don't see that, and I'm going to hide this guy just so I can reach through here and delete the top face up there as well. And what that's going to allow me to do is, since this doesn't have a top or a bottom face, it goes straight through, it's just like a tube, is if I put it in smooth preview mode, it's already a cylinder. And all I really need for this guy is just to look like a tube. So we're going to do the same thing that we did from before, and we are just going to, instead of adding my edge loops in, it's quicker for me in this particular case to just use the smooth tool right here. So I'm just going to click on that, and as you can see, it has doubled the amount of edge loops on here, which for me, I'm just going to select 1, 2, and I can't see that guy in there, so I'm just going to use a selection box to select everything up here and then deselect those verticals because I don't want them to be circularized, and then I'm going to use the circularize tool. So that's all taken care of. Let's go ahead and do that one more time because I've noticed something a little bit wonky there. There we go, much better. So now this is feeling like a nice uniform geometric cylinder. So that's pretty cool. Moving up, it looks like I've got something very similar up here on this guy, but this particular shape has a chamfer in which, first of all, it needs to be lower, so I'm just going to lower that down. It has like a kind of a chamfer in which this part rounds off while this part stays kind of smooth and tubular, and I think we can accomplish that by a couple of different ways. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split this in half by inserting an edge loop right there through the middle. I'm going to delete this face down here, and since that leaves this edge loop here selected, I can go ahead and hold shift and extrude this in, so that way it kind of closes in onto the inner tube, if that makes sense. And then over here, I'm going to take these two guys. I hold shift so that I can select multiple faces at once, and I can hit delete just like that. And now I can hold shift to extrude these in, but instead of grabbing this center cube like I did before, I'm going to grab this square because I only want 2 out of the 3 axes to be manipulated or extruded. So I'm going to hold shift and let's drag that in, and now I've got a pretty nice, there we go, little hinge for this guy to cycle on, which is kind of cool. That also shows that I've got, some of this tube sticking through, and I don't really want that, so I'm just going to select that top edge loop just like that and just drag it down to where I really need it to be, which is about right there, kind of hidden away. So this guy is getting there. I think it's looking pretty decent so far. I'm going to add some edge loops so that way I can get just a little bit more structure to it, because right now it's feeling a little bit too low poly, and if I do this, it definitely doesn't look like what I'm trying to get it to look like. So it does need a couple more edge loops, and so I'm going to put maybe one of them going along this side right here, and then maybe one right there, and maybe one right there. So now instead of 4 sides, it's going to have 8, and I can kind of rinse and repeat the same thing that I was doing from before, which is just hitting circularize on these guys and letting them kind of do the work for me, which is nice. Another thing that you could do is you can always just, grab these guys. I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to hit R for scale, and I'm going to scale them in just until they start looking like, oh, I know what's going on. This is what's going on. I totally forgot to add that final edge loop. There we go. Well, I don't need to scale it in. All right, so we're good to go. I can also select these edge loops right here that I want to look more circular and hit the circularize button, and that does the job pretty decently well. If it ends up a little bit crooked, I'm going to hit E and just kind of rotate it back into place, just like that. That should be okay. And there we go. There we have it. Let's scoot these guys down just to get it to appear more cylindrical. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 edge loops, and notice how it's kind of boxy, but if we just lower those edge loops down a little bit, it's going to look a little bit better, I think. And there we go. So now I've made this hinge, or this kind of stand hinge that's right there, and that's going to connect to this bar, which connects to everything else, to the body of the microphone. So let's go ahead and build. This has a bezel that goes around it, and it's more of like a bumper that protects and suspends the microphone. And so we're going to build that very quickly as well. And what I'm actually doing is, if you notice, these two parts need to connect, and I'm actually going to combine both of these, and I'll show you how we do that in just a little bit. But first things first, let's start with our bumper first. We're going to delete the top and the bottom, just like that, so that way if I put it in smooth preview mode, it looks way more like a cylinder that we need it to be. Again, we're going to smooth it, and then we're going to select these dudes right here and circularize just to make it a cylinder again. So that's good to go. And now I'm going to add a little bit more polygons. I deleted that middle edge loop because I don't need it right now. But instead of just having 8 of these faces that build up this cylinder, I'm going to hit smooth again, so that way I get even more going around it. And because I already hit circularize on it, it's adding more geometry to a circle, or to a cylinder, so I don't need to hit that button again. But what that's going to do is it's going to give me enough different faces right here that I can blend both of these parts together, and that's exactly what I want to do. So let's see, I can probably get away with doing one more right there. That's probably plenty. And what I'm looking for is these 4 faces that I'm going to bridge with, the backside of this. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and extrude this guy. So I'm going to hit Control E, and what that's going to allow me to do is set a thickness. So this was a 2D cylinder, but now I can set, let's say 0.4, and make a pretty decent kind of extrusion, or a 3-dimensional form based out of that 2-dimensional shape that we had from before, which is nice. So that's feeling pretty good. I'm noticing that this bumper has a little bit of a pillowed, like a concave shape to it, so I'm going to grab that middle edge loop and just scale it up a hair so it's nice and rounded on the outside. Now let's go ahead and combine these 2 guys right here. So first things first, this guy needs to have a couple of edge loops to match. Whenever I'm trying to bridge it, I need to make sure that if I've got 4 faces, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 down here, I also want, let's see if I can scoot this guy back, I also want 4 faces on the side that I'm going to be kind of gluing these 2 parts together. So that's our goal for now. So let's go ahead and go to object mode and select both of these guys, and we're going to hit mesh and combine. Once we do that, you can go ahead and delete history freeze transformations, because it's going to add some stuff down here that we can get rid of later on. But now if I select one or the other, both of them are selected because it's now the same thing. It's now just one poly surface, which is really cool. So with that being said, I can select those groups of 4 faces that we talked about from before. I can delete them, and now I can, whoops, kind of bridge these 2 together. So I'm going to scoot this nice and close, and I'm going to select both of these edge loops. Double clicking selects the entire edge loop, so now that everything is highlighted all the way around, I can use the bridge command, which is up here, the bridge tool, and now that bridges these 2 parts, fuses it into one. It's almost like if you take 2 pieces of clay and ceramics or something like that, and you've got to slick them and then attach them in a proper way. And this is how we do it in 3D modeling. Now you'll notice this is showing up as green. That's an artifact of sometimes it happens, sometimes at random, whenever you're working in this. However, something that I found you could do is just Control Delete that weird face, maybe just one, go to Mesh, Fill Hole, and that seems to solve my problem. So I don't have to worry about it too much, which is nice. Now, let's come over to, I'm going to select these 4 faces right here, because I'm going to make this kind of round out a little bit, just so that ways, there we go. And I'm going to hit R to scale and scale it down, just so that ways it's a little bit more of, and let me hide this out as I can show you, a little bit more of a rounded nose. There we go. It's feeling pretty good. Maybe select these 2 and then just translate them out a little bit. That might help. And maybe take these guys and scoot them out just to round it out a little bit. There we go. That's feeling pretty well. All right, we'll make that more cylindrical too. There we go. Okay, so now that we've made the bumper that was a little bit complex, but I think we did pretty well, I'm also noticing that these edges that I'm selecting right here, they're pretty defined in my reference. And so what that tells me that I need to do right here is I need to go ahead and bevel these edges, and the way we'll do that is with the bevel tool up here. So if I select, and I can double click to select the edge loops, sometimes it doesn't select everything if it's not a full loop. So I had to click it, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, double click 8 times to select all of the ones that I want beveled. And now I can hit bevel with the bevel tool. Whenever we do this, it's very important to turn chamfer off. And maybe I'll bring this down to like a smaller number like 0.02. And we'll call that a day. That's looking pretty good. There we go. We can also bevel the inside of this too. I think it'll be okay. We won't see too much of it. So now that that guy's out of the way, we've got most of these pretty much done. I'm also going to make this hinge part right here, which is pretty much just a knob. And the way we'll do that is going to be very similar to how we did, there we go, the bumper that was on there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this guy alone for right now and take this face that is pointed inwards, and I'm going to hold extrude, and we're going to shrink that in, and we're going to pull this through. And so now we've got an axle, and now we've got a knob. That's feeling pretty well. If I need it to be a little bit thicker, which it looks like I do, I'm just going to kind of scale this up until it kind of fills up that circular hole that we had cut out from this hinge in the first place. And so if I put it in smooth mode, it's going to look a little bit better. Now, obviously, it needs a little bit more geometry, kind of like what we were talking about before. So let's go ahead and do that. First things first, I want to bevel everything that I want to be a nice straight 90-degree angle. So I'm going to select this stuff back here and these two portions right here, and we're going to hit bevel, chamfer off, low value like 0.2, and now you can see it's looking a little bit nicer. There we go. I'm going to also grab these faces and kind of pull them in so that way they're not sticking too far out. There we go. And then I can also just slide this guy in a little bit. And now we've got a nice knob that, in an engineering standpoint or a user standpoint, someone can turn that dial and loosen or tighten this kind of hinge right there. So let's focus on the very last portion of this, which is going to be the microphone. We've got a cylinder right here, so you guys know the drill. I'm going to turn this guy into a cylinder. It's a cube right now. So the way we do that is we can put it into, let's see, well, let's go ahead and delete this top face and this bottom face first, and then we can smooth it. So now it's got 8 sides, looking pretty well. And I can take 1, 2, and 3 edge loops right there, oops, the top and the bottom, and I can circularize it just like how we did before. There we go. All right, we're getting there. We're almost done. So a couple of things that I'm noticing about this particular reference is there's kind of a step right here. It looks like there's a dial on the bottom for you to adjust, I guess, the gain of your microphone. So I'm going to build that into there as well. Let's see. And it looks like, yeah, so, okay, so there is a, yeah, let's build that in. So this part shrinks in, and then this part comes out, and that creates the knob. And I'm going to seal that hole by going to Mesh, Fill Hole. Notice this is an n-gon. It is a face that has more than 4 sides. It is an octagon, so in order to fix that, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to cut this octagon into 4 quads. And the way you do that is clicking on the multi-tool icon right here. And then, of course, to exit out, I'll just hit W or E or R, and that'll exit me out of any tool. So now that I got this in, I'm also going to bevel this edge just like that. Maybe shrink that down to 0.2. There we go. And maybe bevel a couple of these. This time I'm going to have chamfer off. And so now that is what the bottom of this microphone is looking like. So it's not too shabby. A lot of work done and not too much time. Now the top of this guy is pretty simple. So all it really is just a sealed off, kind of cylinder. So all I really need to do here is mesh fill hole. And of course, I'm going to make sure that I use the multi-cut tool to get rid of n-gons. Click, 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 click. There we go. Now you'll notice if you click a couple of different ways, if I hold shift, I can attach it to the midpoints of everything. And if you've noticed that you've gone, you made a mistake or something like this happens, you can always use Control Z to backtrack, which is nice. But let's exit out of the tool because we're done using that. I'm going to select all of these dudes up here. This edge loop, bevel, chamfer off, change this to a small value like 0.1. And now we've got a pretty nice microphone body, which is pretty cool. So it's looking a little bit thin, or a little bit kind of too narrow. I'm just going to hit R to scale this whole thing in object mode and just make it a little bit more fat. And now this is pretty good to go. So we spent about a good 20 minutes modeling this guy. There's a couple more details that we can add in, such as, there's like a little kind of component, a wing that sits right here that will be attached. But I'm just going to use this guy right here. Let's actually make it look just a hair better than that. We could do better. So let's delete top and bottom. That way it turns into kind of this cylinder. I'm going to insert an edge loop on either side just to give it more of a boxy look to it, if that makes sense. And we're going to put that guy right there. Now, since this body of the microphone is lined up, if we look right here with the center point, what I can do is I can select this wing, and let's say if I need 4 of them, I can mirror this across the axes and it'll be totally okay. So if I mirror that once, there we go, that guy's good to go. I can also hold shift and rotate this to make a clone, and then I can come over to my transform attributes and type in 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. And then now I can mesh combine and have 4 pieces right here. I can even turn these guys 45 degrees so they make kind of a cooler X shape, which to be honest looks a little bit more true to my reference. So this is a pretty good speed run of a microphone. There's a couple of other things that we're just going to add in very, very quickly. So I'm going to shrink this guy down. We're going to take, let's do this half right here, right there. I'm going to carve out this area to where it's going to have like the mesh part of my microphone, like the part that you speak into. And so there's a couple of things that I could do for this. So let me go ahead and I'm actually going to duplicate this mic body. So now I've got a duplicate down here. I'm going to hide that. I'll show you why we have that for later. But let's go ahead and select these 4 faces right here. I'm going to hit R for scale, and I'm going to scale it down just a tad bit. Oh, before we did that, I did not realize that this guy was all the way down here. Let's scoot him up. There we go. And then we'll scale this in, just so it's like that. And now this part will kind of be the mesh area that they will be talking into. I'm going to add some edge loops because if I look at it in smooth mode, it looks a little bit atrocious. So we're going to fix some of that. And the best way we can do that is by very precisely putting in edge loops that will help support the structure. So if I put one here in the middle, as you can see, it's starting to give it a little bit more of a square shape. I can put 3 instead of just that 1, and that's going to really help it out as well. And then finally, I'm going to put one, if I look right here on this border, I can just add, let's try one of them right there and one of them right there. And let's see, that's looking pretty nice. Maybe instead of 3, I only need 2. I'll delete that guy. And then let's add in one last edge loop all the way down here, just to help it support itself. So now we've got this cutout, which is looking pretty nice, of our kind of microphone mesh portion of this. There's also a couple of other different ways that you can go about doing this. Something that might help you is you can actually delete that portion of it on the inside, and this is kind of neat. You can just make a cube right here, you know, and kind of the same way that we got to our cylinder. Let's go ahead and add some geometry and circularize these edge loops. So that way we've got a nice cylinder right here. I can make this an independent component of my microphone, which is kind of nifty. It looks a little bit nicer. Let's shrink that down, make this just a tad bit wider, and there we go. So a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. Obviously, there's some pros and cons to either or that you go with, but it's all in kind of dependent on what you're looking to accomplish with these particular assets and how important these assets are in your composition. So, you know, not every asset needs to be, you know, the kind of the best looking, you know, hero asset, especially if it's just a background asset. So you can kind of pick and choose the battles that you need to fight when it comes to what type of assets that you've got to make and how you're going to make them. But for me, I can do a little bit of tweaking right there and call it a day for this guy, for this particular demo, because we're just about out of time. But hopefully this helps in kind of showing you some of the tools that I know we've talked about, almost all of these tools right here. It turns out I didn't need that duplicate, so great thing that this guy is off the cuff. But hopefully this helps, you know, kind of show a different type of workflow when it comes to making all of this stuff. Let's not forget to freeze our transformations and delete history. I'm going to group all of this together and call this microphone. And now this guy is ready for UV unwrapping, and then we're going to texture it, and we can do all sorts of stuff with it. But this is a quick way of how we can make a microphone or any of the other types of assets with these types of tools. So if you have any questions, reach out. But hopefully this helps, and I will catch you guys next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.